How did the director of a zoo with a weekend hobby flying remote-controlled airplanes become enemy number one of the pro-Russian forces in Ukraine? Yuri dedicated his life to caring for the animals at the zoo in Odessa until last year, when he was forced to leave his position after refusing to become complicit in a corruption scheme.
Yanukovych didn't understand one thing. The zoo director is a guard for the animals, and a guard cannot be stealing. He had to be a guard. You can deceive people, but you cannot deceive animals.
Yuri took his passion for remote-controlled planes and video cameras straight to ARMIYE SOS, just one of several volunteer organizations that support Ukrainian armed forces with essential equipment. Now he travels to the front line to spot enemy positions and guide in artillery fire, something he says that has made him unpopular among the Russian spies that he says operate in the Donbass area.
When I was there, they announced me to be enemy number one because I traced down a Russian center full of military equipment.
The volunteer stopgap is urgently needed. Last year, the Kiev Post newspaper published a photo of Red Mullet, the nickname of a Ukrainian soldier who goes to war wearing completely donated gear. It highlighted the severe shortfall in equipment that the Ukrainian government can provide to their soldiers. At Patriot Defense, a non-governmental organisation dedicated to training soldiers in giving first aid training and equipment, volunteers say the soldiers' situation is grim.
They get very little from the government. They get small first aid kits that just have old rubber Soviet tourniquet and one bandage.
On top of the poor quality equipment is the lack of infrastructure. According to Patriot Defense, the average time from a soldier's injury to first medical contact can be up to an hour. And from there it can be a further 2 days to a field medical surgical hospital. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense says this is a legacy of annual cuts in the armed forces dating back to the collapse of the Soviet Union and only halted after Yanukovych's government was ousted. Some also point out that the Yanukovych government seemed to deliberately neglect Ukraine's armed forces, especially in the east.
Since there was no apparent evidence of any danger from neighbors, the process of shortages continued up until the last year.
When Russia invaded Crimea, Ukraine was caught off guard. This has made the fighting volunteers even more important.
The help of volunteers was especially felt in the first months of the conflict for supplying the army with helmets.
But for the volunteers at ARMIYE SOS like Alina, who gives up every weekend to help, the most important thing is there is no time to wait for government support.
We have no communication with the government. We are independent volunteers. We know that the government is probably doing something, but we don't see any result. And maybe it's easier for us to do what we are doing independently.